My first marathon, still to this day, is probably my favorite, without a doubt. It was at New York City, 2001, and obviously September 11th occurred that year, and it was devastating, to put it simply. And the theme that year was United We Run. So it really was this day of unifying global citizenship. When you are out there with 50,000 runners, you feel that connection. That one day, for me, helps revitalize not just my passion for running, but my belief in society, humanity, and the fact that the world is headed in the right direction.
Welcome to Very Beginning, a podcast where we shift the narrative from happy ending to exciting beginning. My name is Anastasia, and through conversations with inspiring entrepreneurs, athletes, influencers, and all-around trailblazers, I'm looking to explore how we can get more comfortable with change and find the courage to unlock that scary first chapter to something we've been wanting to do for far too long. New episodes will be live every Sunday. So without further ado, and so it begins. Kevin, let's take it from the very beginning. Welcome.
Thank you. It is really good to see you.
It's very good to see you, and I'm so thrilled to be talking to you today. So thank you first of all for your time. And what I kind of like to do on this podcast before jumping into whatever this person accomplished or what I want to talk about is to introduce someone by thinking about the impact that person had on me, especially if I know this person. And you personally, I had the pleasure of learning from you. You were my professor at Columbia, and just wanted to use this opportunity to thank you for everything you taught me, but also really making me a better communicator, presenter, teammate, leader. So just wanted to say again how thrilled I was to have that experience with you.
Well, I would say that right back to you as well. One of the most rewarding aspects of my job is when I am learning from students that I get to partner with and work with. And you were someone that, for me, made me feel an immediate reward in the passion that I have for learning and for education and for recognizing that, we have that finite time in the classroom, and what becomes most important is what we do when we leave it. And I'm thrilled to see what you are doing, but I want to be very clear that I learned just as much from you as you might have ever learned in my classes. And I'm thrilled to see you doing so well, and I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. So apart from being an incredible professor at an Ivy League school, you are a marathoner. Full stop, which is already a huge achievement. You completed your 10th marathon this year. So first of all, congratulations on that. But let's take it back to the first one. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you even got into this crazy thing of running 26.2 miles?
Absolutely. My first marathon, still to this day, is probably my favorite, without a doubt. It was at New York City, 2001. But you asked how did it happen, and it really wasn't meant to. It was one of those things that I was running on the track team at NYU in my senior year. And I remember just kind of being braggadocious and saying, oh, I could run a marathon. I mean, I had never probably even run over 12 miles, even though I had run track my whole undergrad and kind of pre-college life. And I remember one of my friends said, okay, then go ahead, apply to the New York City Marathon. And I had heard back then, we're talking about 21 years ago now, I think the acceptance rate back then for the lottery was maybe 1 in 3 would get it.
Wow.
And I thought, the odds aren't in my favor. I will put my name in for the lottery, anticipate not getting in. And then I could tell everybody, oh, I would have run a marathon, but I didn't get in. So I put my name in, and I found out that I actually got in. And it was one of those like, oh man, now I have to put my money where my mouth is and start training. But there was a lot of talk about the marathon being canceled, because if you think about it, the marathon that year, I remember, was November 4th, 2001. And obviously September 11th occurred that year. And it was devastating, to put it simply. And I remember selfishly kind of thinking, oh gosh, I really do hope they still do it, because I think, first of all, it will be a uniting kind of event, I think, but it'll also demonstrate the resilience of New Yorkers. And that was all very true. They decided to move forward with the marathon. And I remember actually at the starting line, they released doves, white doves as well.
Wow.
And it was really, of course, we
powerful.
sing New York, New York at the starting line there. And it was a really emotional beginning. And what was interesting too, Anastasia, was that the theme that year was United We Run. And I think that was before any of the events on September 11th happened. So it really was this day of unifying not just New Yorkers, but global citizenship in a way, right? Because it's people from all over the world. It's the largest marathon in the world. And we all came together that day. And I mean, there were moments that we were running underneath massive American flags, and you saw FDNY and NYPD, and it was an amazing day. So, what's really tough about that being my first marathon is that any of the others since then, have a lot to live up to.
Of
But I would
course.
like to hear a little bit more about your marathon that you ran.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I get like goosebumps from your story, and like my first marathon, and in general, like marathons, people who never done one or seen one, right? Like, just think, oh my god, like crazy people, why do you do this? But I think also what I found on my personal journey and what I just took from yours is, I don't know if you've heard it, but there's this quote by Kathrine Switzer, the first woman who ran the best Boston Marathon, who said, "If you ever lose faith in human nature, go watch a marathon." And I think that is so true. Like what you just said in your story, right? Like after this horrific event on 9/11, and these like people coming together, and literally, I mean, I did it a couple years ago, but still it was like this moment of really realizing like, yeah, I'm running here by myself, but I'm really not by myself. Like I'm not alone. I feel this crowd. I feel these like 50,000 runners, and in New York, like 2 million people come to watch you. I mean, this is pre-COVID,
Yes.
but it was
Yeah.
just incredible. And also, then last year, I watched my best friend complete her first marathon, which I think was equally emotional to my marathon. I literally was standing there crying. My husband was like, "What's wrong with you?" But it was just so emotional because for her, it was such a life dream to do this and to be at the finish line, even to see people like, some people collapse, right? Like the legs just give up, and just random people come and like carry you over the finish line. Like, I don't know, like marathons hold such a special place in my heart.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's moving, and I mean that as a
it's
pun,
so
right? So of
moving.
course we're moving our bodies, but the fact is that there is marathon fever, right? People come to cheer you on, and they see the effort. I think what we recognize there is that this isn't just something that's occurring today, but it's been months and months and months of training, of people having dedication, of people being so diligent in that training. And when I think of diligence, I always think about what we do when no one else is looking, what we do when no one else is watching, and that's what goes into that final race that the crowds come out to cheer on to support. So no wonder, right? There's a lot of context there. It's a multi-layered in the fact that people are yes cheering you on in that moment, but they're realizing the effort and dedication that you've put in, and they're being motivated themselves. They're kind of galvanized themselves in that marathon fever way to say, "Oh, I want to do that." And I think what's amazing about running is that yes, it is isolating in a way, it's individual in a way, and that's what's so I think that's a championship you kind of feel in your own self, right? That you have these new accomplishments and achievements, and you feel like a champion that you're achieving them on your own. It's because of the work you put in. But what I love about it is that it is also very much a team sport in the sense that when
Yes.
you are out there with 50,000 runners, you feel that connection. You may
Yes.
not know each other, you may not ever see each other again, but you know that you are kind of tied, tethered in a way to this shared experience. It does impact and affect those around you. My children see that I run. They know that I go out there. They cheer me on at my races, and that it becomes kind of, believe it or not, a familial sport in a way.
It's a family
That
thing
other
then for
people
you
become
guys.
part of your experience.
Yeah. And since you mentioned it, how, because from the marathon, like the thing is, and we just talked about like the dedication you learn and perseverance, all these like more obvious things, but were there like any specific things the marathons have really taught you that you then now also pass on to your kids?
Yeah, well, I thank you for asking that question. I think it's a wonderful one. In the last couple of years, I raise money and fundraise for a nonprofit called Futures Ignite. They used to be called Wheels, and they're a Washington Heights based school system that they begin with kindergarten and they have the students all the way through their senior year. And what's wonderful about this school is that many of these students are first generation to try to go to college. And they come typically from different socioeconomic classes, and they don't necessarily have the same opportunity that others in the Isle of Manhattan might have. They support the students as they're going through their college application and support them to continue to support them throughout their 4 years in college and undergrad. So they have that consistent kind of connection. And it helps the students to know that they're not alone, and it helps them to have opportunity that they might not have had otherwise. So a lot of the time when I'm like, oh, I don't feel like running today, or oh my gosh, I have to go run 20 miles this weekend, or whatever it might be, I think about those students. And as you know, Anastasia, education is very important to me. And it makes sense then that this would be a very kind of organic connection with these students. They're the ones that help to motivate me, frankly, that when I realize that a lot of what I'm doing is personal, but if I can support these students and that people do want to donate to my cause and my children do see what I'm, working toward for the betterment of people outside myself, I do believe that we have a privilege with the access to education that we have. And I think that that privilege comes with this sort of opportunity that opens up doors for us. And that opportunity in time then yields responsibility, right? That we have responsibility to, in a way, try to welcome others to that same sort of platform, that they can have access to knowledge and information, education, so that their opportunity can grow. And then in time, they'll realize that their privilege almost allows them to have a special sort of responsibility to pay back. And that's a lot of what the marathon means to me.
And I think it's so beautiful for your kids to also grow up and see it, right? And see like you complete marathon after marathon and experience it with you. I mean, it's definitely, I think it's a bonding experience probably, right? Also for them to go through it with you together.
It is so fun. So they know that they'll be like, "Oh, Daddy's going for a run." My children are 4 and 2 now, and they'll know that I'm going for a run. They'll say, "Have a good run, Daddy." But what I love is that they also come to the actual event. So my husband is a star on the marathon. I mean, he
Oh,
deserves to get the
bless
medal at the
him.
end of the marathon day because he brings our 2 kids around the 5 boroughs cheering me on. The babies are growing from being worn on the chest to now being on the shoulders to now standing up for themselves, and I come running through and they cheer me on. All I really want to do is stay there. Like, do I have to run the next 9 miles or is this good? But I give them big hugs and they cheer me on. And in that, and this is the truth. And you know that I'm an emotional guy. I actually run away from them and I tear up. I start to cry at that point because I'm already at mile 17. I've just seen my family, and it's a very emotional, wonderful experience. And in the last couple of years, Anastasia, which has been really fun, around mile 25, I find them again in Central Park. And both last year and this year, my daughter Finley grabbed my hand and ran with me for a little while. For that mile 25, she ran with me. She was 3 last year, 4 this year. So it's not that she ran that far, maybe 100
Yeah.
meters, but she
Yeah.
ran with me and
And
then
I'm
kind of,
sure it meant
so
the
now
world
we
for
call
her.
her a marathoner. Yeah. Yeah. And I say, you've run the New York City Marathon. You've technically twice run the
You
New York
need to
City
make her a
Marathon.
mini
And it's
medal or something.
without a doubt, without a doubt. Yeah. So, I mean, they're very aware and they know that it's not just also a one-time event, but it's commitment, like we were talking about earlier, right? Kind of that dedication to that, not just that race, but to the students at Futures Ignite and to do it year after year.
Yeah. And also the emotional aspect, and you just brought it up, and thank you for sharing that also. I think that is something also so monumental in the whole marathon experience, the emotions that come with it. Because I feel like in that whole race, you live through a million emotions, from like, why the hell am I doing this, to like, I'm so proud to, I cannot do it. Like, just for me, it was like a whirlwind of emotions. And so I'm wondering, like, for you, from your first to your 10th marathon, do these emotions change? Is it still like every time you go for this, you kind of go through a roller coaster, or has it like settled down a bit?
What a great question. I love that question, Anastasia. Thank you. Yeah, for me, it's always mile 18. For some reason, I always just get that, feel that emotional it's like a spike in my emotion, and I think that it's a wonderful kind of moment for me to kind of reflect on what I'm doing and to live in that moment. One of the things I've realized with the marathon, which you might have felt as well, is that you get to mile 5, you're like, oh gosh, I only have 21 miles left of this, and then you get to half marathon, oh man, half of this is already done. I have to really try to enjoy the outcome here and what's about to be completed. But I remember I was actually running the marathon in Anchorage, Alaska. It's called the Mayor's Midnight Marathon. And it's actually in June. So it's perpetual sunlight at that time of year. And I remember getting to mile 18 somewhere in the woods of Anchorage and getting like just starting to cry. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so far away from everyone I know. I feel I'm out here in the woods running by myself in Alaska. Like, what am I doing? It was one of those moments. But it's always around that mile 18 that I feel that way.
Your body just knows that
Yeah.
mile 18, that's when the waterworks start.
And then I think what happens with New York, which is a little bit different, as you know, is that you have such support throughout the 26 miles. So the spectators are so bold; they get so galvanized by what we're doing that some of them, they get right. They're like, "Go, run, run!" They're in your face. I mean, it's just so much fun. And this year, I wore. I don't know if I shared with you or not, but this year my children wrote "Daddy" on my. So I had a
Oh,
big a big name tag here that said "Daddy," so people are yelling at me, "Go, Daddy!" And there was some awkward interactions, without
Oh
a
my
doubt.
gosh, I'm
From
sure.
older people to younger people to men to women, all cheering on Daddy. It was certainly a different experience for me than I had
Yeah.
had in previous marathons. What was so fun about it is that people get a kick out of cheering for the runners. I think they have so much fun, and they're really there to support you and to cheer you on. And that's what I love about it. It is quite symbiotic in the sense that you're kind of building off of each other, and you're the it's just all such a positive experience. And to have somebody who's witnessed that I am training nearly every day, and especially certainly every week, and seeing like the months of dedication that go into the training for a marathon specifically, and to finally realize in the actual race itself, and to be able to say, I now understand how much it means to be there for you, to cheer you on, and how much that impacts you. I think that's another beautiful aspect of running, especially marathon.
I think what the marathon shows you so nicely and what you just talked about is this whole like energy feeds of energy, right? And that's like something we can take into like our everyday life, the positivity feeds of positivity, right? And like we experience that in the marathon, like people just give you their energy, and because you get receive that positive energy, you are able to put it out, right? And it's just such a beautiful, yeah, positive effect.
It is, Anastasia. I remember, so my first marathon, again, going back to 2001, at mile 23. So remember, I'd never run more than 23 miles in any training up to that experience. So I knew that there was certainly going to be, a make or break it type thing, right? Like at mile 23, am I going to be able to finish this marathon? I'm not kidding. That was definitely a question that I had. And at mile 23, I remember I started to slow down. I started to be like, oh, this is getting tough. And I was wearing a heavy cotton t-shirt that said NYU, big purple T-shirt that said NYU in white letters. And I remember at mile 23, starting to slow down, and this fellow runner came up to me, and he goes, "Hey, NYU, I'm going to run with you because everyone's cheering for you. They're yelling, 'Go NYU, go NYU.' No one's cheering for me." And he pointed right here, and he had Ohio State. And it was that small. It was written so tiny, just above, on his upper chest there. And he goes, I'm going to keep running with you." And he ran with me for a little while. He kind of motivated me to keep going.
That's
And around
awesome.
mile 24, I remember him saying, "You got this. Have a great race." And he carried on. He is the reason why I was able to push through and to finish that first marathon. I would love to know who that unknown runner was.
That's beautiful. Well, so if you were the one in 2001 wearing a Ohio State t-shirt, maybe reach out to us.
No, maybe this is finally it. We're gonna
That'd be
finally meet
something.
again.
When you think about, and why I think a marathon is like such an amazing topic for like my podcast focusing about new chapters is, as you said, like in our training, we never run, or most of us never run the entire 26.2 miles or 42 kilometers. And that kind of like the psychology of that, to know like, okay, it is actually like a new chapter, a new beginning, something new you do every training, and something new that you will do on the day of the marathon, is I think something very powerful. And I don't know how it was for you,
Yeah,
but I remember saying to myself, because I'm not a runner, like I'm not like you. I have not been into running. I just am a little bit crazy and obsessed with challenges. So I just set myself this challenge and went for it. But I said to myself and to my mom and like to my boyfriend at that time, like, if I have to crawl into the finish line, I will do this, but I will
yeah,
finish. And that's kind of like how I went
yeah.
into it. And so I wasn't even that fearful, like what will happen. And in my training, I did 18 miles. Like that was the biggest, because I'm not so fast, and you shouldn't really run past 3 hours in your training. So 18 miles was that for me. And so at the day of the marathon, everything from 18-mile on was new territory. And it was hard and it was tough,
Hmm.
but kind of like having this mindset of, you know what, if I have to crawl, I'll do it, really helped me. So I wondered, like, for you, because I know you are a fast runner, is there something kind of that you say to yourself?
I felt the exact same sentiment for that first marathon, that I was like, I don't even care if it takes me 5 hours. I'm going to finish this marathon no matter what. You're absolutely right. Once you've done that once, then it's almost like, okay, well, there's nothing new there, right? Because you know that you can run it. So you might need a new source of motivation. And without a doubt, I would say that these students at Futures Ignite have been kind of that continuous tether for the last 4 or 5 years of running. But what I've also lived, I've been really motivated by my family, by my children. When my daughter was born, I remember I said, this marathon is for her. And all the training, I was always thinking about her. I kept singing "Doing It All for My Baby" by Huey Lewis and the News. Doing it all for my baby. I was just thinking about my daughter swimming and saying, this race
I
is for
love
her.
that.
And 2 years later, when Our son was born that first year of his life, Anastasia. He was born in Canada. It was a global pandemic. We had to fight to get up there to be with him. And our son ended up getting a staph infection, and he was in the ER for a week. I mean, it was
So
all
horrible.
really challenging stuff. And I remember that year saying this race is for him. The whole training and the whole 26 miles, thinking about my son Brenton and saying that this race is for him. I do love the way that it impacts our family. It's a part of our life. It's a part of our culture. It's part of our little micro, cosm here, that our kids know that on Sunday mornings, Daddy goes for his long runs, and they see that commitment. I do hope that we are kind of creating our own kind of family culture around supporting one another in what we decide to do, cheering each other on. What's better in life than to know that you have that support system, and that no matter what, there are people behind you cheering you on. And that's what I hope my kids see.
That's so beautiful for people who maybe don't have that support system, right, in their life, or maybe like find themselves in an episode of their life where it's just not someone as close to them who would stand there supporting them. What would you recommend to someone who's like, I really want to do this marathon, but I just don't have a significant other or friend who I know would show up for me? Would you kind of say still go for it, or what would your advice be for that person?
Without a doubt. You know what I think about running as well is that I like to run sometimes with other people because it's nice to have that kind of interaction. But I certainly prefer running on my own. It is kind of like that time that I get to be with my thoughts and to be out in nature and to be out in the elements. And we spend so much of our lives working or sitting, and this is a time that I get to move my body and be outside and be alone. But the other thing, you can indeed, of course, like New York Road Runners has a lot of club events and club meetings. New York City Runs is another one here, and those are local, of course. And what I really appreciate about those is they can be intimidating, I think, until you realize that they're actually not, because they're the most wonderful places that any runner of any background who either has run track in undergrad or never run a day in her life. This is a place that you can find the right kind of coaching and others who are in the same kind of or similar situation that you might be in. And so there are indeed other ways to build that support system. The other thing about running that's great is that if you want to go run 1 mile, go run the 1 mile. If you want to go run 10 miles, go run the 10 miles. And nobody's watching except you. And that's what I mean by that idea of diligence, right? Coming back to that idea that hopefully nobody's judging you either. And you don't need to judge yourself. You can do it. I really like what you said, right? That marathons, they're an invitation to anyone and everyone. And after each New York City Marathon, especially, there's always that spike of the marathon fever we were talking about earlier. The people say, "I'm going to run one next year," and I think that if anybody listening feels like they have that inclination, there's nothing stopping you. And there's every reason why you certainly can do it. If we can run marathons, Anastasia, you and I, anyone can do it.
Especially me, who's not a runner. I think honestly, literally everyone can do it. And you said, you said to yourself, even if it takes me 5 hours, well, it actually took me 5 hours. But you know what? I'm proud of that time. I have it engraved on my medal, and it's absolutely fine, because for me it was just kind of the challenge of completing it, of doing it, right, of living through it, and it was one of the best experiences of my life so far, 100%. And just to recap what you just said, I think it really comes full circle that running a marathon, you can do it to be alone, but you don't have to. And if you don't have to, you can find such a beautiful community and support. And I think also even within yourself, you find how to, even when you're alone, kind of not feel lonely. I think it's a weird sentiment, but I really had that sense of I'm not alone because I have all these people around me, even if I don't know them. I feel their support, and it's just so nice. I think that's definitely a beautiful thing.
Without a doubt. And the other thing I think is that, yes, it's physical, but I think that the mental and emotional benefits far outweigh the physical ones. And really, for me, that's what I found, especially as I get older and I have perhaps more responsibility or more concerns, or whatever it might be. I think that, yes, it feels good to move my body. And yes, I feel good that I've done something physical. But the benefit that I receive by running for both mental and emotional well being far outweighs the physical aspects, I think. And that should be attractive for anyone.
Yeah. And I don't know if you do it too, but ever since I've finished the marathon, what I kind of developed is whenever I'm faced with a challenge, is maybe it's I don't know, giving a big presentation, or maybe it's a job interview, whatever. I say to myself, you completed a marathon. This cannot be half as hard. And just saying that to myself, for some reason, I tell to myself, okay, you're going to be fine. It's not going to be as hard, you know? So almost this comparison to, I achieved this in the past, whatever comes next, you got this. helps me so much.
It's so true. It's become a barometer for everything else,
It
right?
did.
Like, well, if I run a marathon, I can do this.
Exactly. Yes.
Changing a dirty diaper, I can do it. I can definitely do
100%.
it. I run a marathon.
Yes, that is so true. Oh, wonderful. Well, Kevin, before we close out, I want to come to a little segment I do at the end called the Final Three, which is
Okay.
just meant to be a quick kind of 3 questions to recap what we talked about. You can, of course, reply in more detail, but they're kind of meant to be this little short 3 takeaways. So the first one is, what helped you personally go from that idea of I want to run a marathon to actually doing it?
To go back to what I had said earlier, it was kind of more of I didn't know that it was something I could see through. It was more like I said that I would do it. And I didn't know if I had the follow through to do it. And I think that we are challenged a lot by our jobs or by people we look up to or people that we're inspired by. But I think if we can be a source of that for ourselves, then to say like with each new step, with each new run, that you can actually challenge yourself and have personal accomplishment just by going out and running. And that was something that I think helped to motivate me. A method for me as well, right? That I challenge myself to say, look, if someone else believes in me, even if that's just me, if I'm the one that believes in myself, then I can achieve more than I even thought at the beginning.
Beautiful. Nothing to add. Second final question. What was your biggest fear when you signed up for your first marathon? And most importantly, did it come through?
I think this idea that would I be able to do it, like we talked about, can I actually run that far? And then also, would I let others down if I didn't? This idea of thinking like, because we said a little earlier, it becomes more than just about you. And it becomes this idea of, okay, now I'm telling everyone I'm running a marathon. Now I might be raising funds if that's an aspect of what we do as well. And it becomes broadcast in a way that, oh gosh, what now happens if I don't achieve it? And you know what I think I've learned recently, though, is that just this past year, I had a certain PR. I was going for a PR and I wanted to hit a certain goal. A couple weeks ago, a month ago. And I did not hit it this year. And there was a part of me that thought, gosh, I trained so hard for months and I really was ready. There was no reason why I shouldn't have hit that. And then the day was a lot hotter than I think anyone anticipated. And what I learned is that this year's average run time was about 15 to 20 minutes slower than typical years because of the unexpected heat and humidity. So the interesting lesson for me to learn was that I may not have hit my PR this year. I did not, in fact. And it didn't matter. My family was there still cheering me on. I still raised money for these students at Futures Ignite. And the experience that day was still absolutely wonderful with the support of the masses of people that came out from my families and my friends to strangers all throughout the 5 boroughs. And in the end, yes, I might have had a goal. And you want to know what? I didn't hit that specific item within that larger goal that day. And I still walked away with that sense of accomplishment. I think that's a good lesson for me to learn that there are still, even if we might fall short in our own personal expectations, that the experience itself typically is the reward.
I love that. I love that so much, and it's just so true to like that, taking that pressure away and just like embracing whatever the day gives you. But it's a perfect segue because actually my final question is, what was your greatest learning? Talking about learning, so for you, if you would have to pick one in those 10 marathons over 20 years of experience, what was the greatest learning for you?
I think that being a New Yorker is hard. And I think that living the last couple of years the way that we all have has challenged us. And I think there are times that sometimes we can get depressed or we can feel down or we can even feel a little low about the world, about society, about people, about community. And I get, sometimes I get down or I'll get concerned and I'll think about forecasting the future. And is this the kind of country and world that I want to raise 2 kids in, and there's a lot to be concerned about at times. And on that marathon day, I see that we are indeed one global community, that we do indeed support one another, and not only are we there silently, but we're cheering each other on. And it gives me such a hope for the fact that, look, you know what, New York may be hard and it might be tough living in the last couple of years, but also New Yorkers demonstrate that we can all fit together, that we are a global community, and that we can live not just in harmony. And I know that sounds a little, heady and a little hippie, but the fact that it actually works. New Yorkers demonstrate that as a people, we can come together and we can be loving, kind, and decent. And that's, I think, my largest takeaway, that throughout the other 364 days of the year, I might sometimes suffer, get a little low, get a little concerned, get a little disappointed. And that one day for me helps revitalize not just my passion for running, but my belief in society, humanity, and the fact that the world is headed in the right direction.
Well, as Kathrine Switzer said, if you lose faith in humanity, go watch a marathon. Or better yet, run a marathon. If someone is inspired by this conversation.
Exactly. Or not, right?
As
you said, or not.
Absolutely fine if not, but definitely recommend
Maybe don't.
to watch one. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, sharing everything with me. So thank you. It was truly, truly a pleasure and honor to have you. And thank you for your support.
Well, Anastasia, you are an inspiration to me. You always have been from the moment that I met you. And I was thrilled to be invited. Thank you for having me. And congratulations with all that you have happening.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Have a wonderful rest of your night.